Welcome. Welcome, everybody, and thank you for taking time out on the afternoon to Zoom in here with us and learn about what's happening at the Okefenokee Wildlife Refuge. Just a little bit, just as a quick introduction, I don't want to take too much time away from our presenters today, but just a quick introduction. My name is Heikkila, and I am a co-leader with Jean Millkey for the GRITS Broadband, and that's Great Old Broads residing in the South, and we are just getting our broadband up and running. I live up in the far northern forests of Georgia, up in Morganton, and Jean's out of Atlanta. For those don't know if anybody is new, I know we had a couple people just chatting about in Florida who were not current members of Great Old Broad. So let me just give you, I think the best way or best description for Broads is in our mission and our vision statement. So I wanted just to give those really quickly, and then I'll hand it over to Kim. But the Great Old Broads for Wilderness is a women-led national grassroots organization that inspires and engages activism to preserve and protect wilderness and wild lands. Our vision right along with that is that wild public lands are treasured for their intrinsic values and protected for current and future generations. And certainly the focus of our talk today, the Okefenokee, is right along with goes right along with our mission and vision statement and protection of the Okefenokee. As Julie was saying earlier, Broads is a national organization based out of Durango, Colorado. We have it's structured so that we have chapters, which we refer to as broadbands. And we currently have nearly 40 regional broadband chapters in 16 states. So that's just a little bit about who we are. What I'd like to introduce today is our speakers. Kim Bednarek is the executive director of the Okefenokee Swamp Park and Okefenokee Adventures. And Emily Floore, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, is the executive director of St. Mary's Riverkeeper. And again, Jean is our co-leader here for GRITS, and Julie Savage is our grassroots regional coordinator. So I'm going to turn it over to Kim Bednarek, and let's get started.
All right, terrific. Everyone see that okay?
Yes.
Terrific. So first, thanks to Great Old Broads for Wilderness and GRITS and Third Act for hosting me today. I'm delighted to share the story of the Okefenokee. I am Kim Bednarek. I'm the executive director of Okefenokee Swamp Park and Adventures. And I have actually been at Okefenokee Swamp Park since 2020. It is a 77-year-old nonprofit in the Okefenokee region. We are a partner to the state of Georgia and the Department of Interior through the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the Okefenokee National Wildlife Refuge. I'm happy if we want to have this to be kind of conversational. I will run you through the slides. For many of you, I'm thinking this might be your first introduction to the Okefenokee. I'm also originally from Boston, Massachusetts, for the Nor'easters on the call. I grew up on the South Shore in Scituate, Mass., and I've been in the southeast part of the U.S. for about 30 years. So the Okefenokee region is in southeast Georgia, and you can see it there on the map in green. We focus a lot of our work on regionalism. The Okefenokee Swamp sits in 3 counties in the state of Georgia and 1 county in Florida. The Okefenokee National Wildlife Refuge really anchors the region. It is, the swamp itself is 438,000 acres, almost 700 square miles. The Okefenokee National Wildlife Refuge, which is a Fish and Wildlife Service property, it occupies and manages 402,000 of those acres. And for all of the wilderness lovers on the call, 353,000 acres nestled inside really the heart of the Okefenokee National Wildlife Refuge is congressionally designated wilderness. So if you haven't visited the Okefenokee Swamp, it is an absolutely phenomenal ecological experience to be inside the swamp. It's also the headwaters of the Swanee and St. Mary's rivers, and it is a remarkable precipitation-fed headwater, actually quite unique in the world, which is one of the things I'm going to talk about with you for the next 10 or 15 minutes. So the swamp became a national wildlife refuge in 1937. It is the largest refuge in the United States, and it's actually remarkable in many, many ways. It's designated as a national landmark, a wetland of international importance, and it's also now on the list to become a World Heritage Site. The flora and fauna are exquisite, with 850 species of plants, 40 mammals, 50 reptiles, more than 200 species of birds, and a multitude of fish. So it is just a remarkable wetland and a remarkable ecosystem. So here it is. This is the Okefenokee Swamp. You can see that there are some recreational opportunities in the swamp. There's 120 miles of water trails, and there's 3 distinct gateway communities entrances to the Okefenokee. The Okefenokee National Wildlife Refuge is quite unique because unlike national parks, which are the sister right inside the Department of Interior, with national parks on one side, and then with national wildlife refuges on the other, this National Wildlife Refuge has lots of opportunity for exploration and visitation. So on the northern corner is Okefenokee Swamp Park, where I'm the executive director of that 501c3 nonprofit. And we do offer educational and visitation opportunities through the northeastern entrance. On the eastern side, you'll see there's the main entrance, which is actually in Charlton County, which is a different county. And it is the main entrance for the Okefenokee Fish and Wildlife Service, the National Wildlife Refuge. That's their headquarters. And that's how you're going to access majority of the 120 miles of water trails that are available. And then on the west side, which is over here, nestled inside the National Wildlife Refuge, is Stephen C. Foster State Park. It is the only National Wildlife Refuge in the U.S. that has a state park nestled inside of it. So it's a unique place for lots of reasons. It straddles 2 states. It is the largest blackwater swamp in North America. And then it also has this blend of nonprofit, state, and federal management that occurs in and around it. 10 camping platforms for those of you on the call who likes to experience wilderness camping. This is actually like a lifetime highlight. If you haven't been here, you are going to have to call me and come on a camping trip. We have platforms like you're looking at here where you can set up your tent. We also have islands. Floyd's Island in the middle of the swamp is the most remote camping spot in the state of Georgia. It takes you a couple of days to get there. It's one of the stops when you're doing a cross swamp trip. So just really just an incredibly unique way to experience this wilderness is to do a multi-day camping trip. Canoes and kayaks are the way you're going to get around in the swamp. We do have some motorized boat trips that go out for about an hour to 2 hours to give you an experience on the peripheral aspects of the swamp, but to get all the way into the heart of the swamp and have that experience where you hear bellowing alligators and owls and all of our amphibians, you'd have to do an overnight camping trip. The west side of the swamp, which is where Stephen C. Foster State Park is recognized as an international dark sky park. So for our stargazers in the crowd, it is absolutely a remarkable dark sky designation. Light pollution is limited on the west side. And so when you're at the state park or you're out in the Okefenokee, your nighttime skies are phenomenal. When we talk about the Okefenokee, and in particular the work that I do as the executive director of the nonprofit, is that we work really closely with visitation. So we have a concession contract with both the state of Georgia and the National Wildlife Refuge to steward visitors and students into and around the Okefenokee. The Okefenokee really anchors the region as a driver for rural economic development, providing more than $50 to $80 million in revenue and more than 800 jobs to the region. So as I go through this presentation, I think that it will become apparent how important this is, how sustainability and stewardship really connects to rural health, and particularly the health of the economy and the people who live in these communities. So what's a really exciting project that I've had the opportunity to steward alongside my board of trustees and an incredible array of partners from really around the country, and at this point around the globe, is that the Okefenokee National Wildlife Refuge has sat on the tentative list to become a World Heritage Site for more than 40 years. And it was just the bid for this designation was just accelerated in September of 2023 when the Department of Interior made the announcement through the Federal Register that we were given the green light to pursue full inscription as a World Heritage Site. So the nonprofit, the Okefenokee Swamp Park, is the private partner, is the funding and project management partner to Fish and Wildlife Service to ensure this activity, and this bid is successful. And if you're new to World Heritage Sites, I'll talk about that as well. But just to give you an overview of this opportunity and why the opportunity is so exciting for the region and for the country and for the globe, is that in the United States, we have 25 World Heritage Sites. The last World Heritage Site that was inscribed was Hopewell Ceremonial Sites in Ohio. The Okefenokee is looking to be put forward in January of 2025 with a completed dossier to move on from the Department of Interior to the World Heritage Convention. When this happens, and over the course of the next couple of years, we'll be moving the Okefenokee National Wildlife Refuge into a position where it will be the first and only National Wildlife Refuge out of nearly 600 refuges in the United States to receive this World Heritage recognition. So it's a really significant project for Fish and Wildlife Service and for the Department of Interior. And because what we believe will happen and what our economic impact analyses have indicated is that this will really anchor a resurgence in ecotourism, outdoor recreation as a rural economic driver for this region. It does have the bipartisan will of both our US senators and both our congressional representatives, which really is Democrat and Republican. And there's not that many projects these days we can say we have full support and full bipartisan political will, which is really one of the reasons that the bid has been fast-tracked. So what is World Heritage? So for those of you who are new to it, it has been around since 1972. The United States was really one of the first countries to sign on and really develop the World Heritage Convention. We have over 1,000 natural and cultural sites globally, and sites are considered based on their outstanding universal value. The sites, regardless of where they are in the world, they retain their sovereignty and they retain their management, right? It really is just it is a recognition that the place is worthy of recognition as an outstanding place globally for its cultural value or its natural value. So an example of some sites in the United States that are natural sites, I put up a list here, includes Yellowstone, the Everglades, Grand Canyon, Great Smoky Mountains, Yosemite. These are iconic American landscapes. And the Okefenokee National Wildlife Refuge being considered and really on the precipice of being recognized as one of these sites really puts it into a new category. It will be the first World Heritage Site in the state of Georgia. Like I said, the first World Heritage Site for the Fish and Wildlife Service, but it's also going to really change people's perception on swamps and the importance of wetlands, right? And so this is a unique opportunity for peatlands and wetlands and swamps. So when we look at the Okefenokee and think about why the Okefenokee would be in this category, what makes it so globally unique, we look at the outstanding universal value, and there's a number of criteria that a site can be considered for. For the Okefenokee, is being considered for two criterion. One is the biological processes. As I said, it is a precipitation-fed headwater of two rivers. One empties into the Gulf and one empties into the Atlantic. It also has an incredible density of peat. We know that peat is a carbon sink. We know that peat can mitigate climate change, and we know how important it is at this point to retain our peat in place anywhere that we possibly can. And the Okefenokee Swamp really has the most notable amounts of peat that we know of in the United States. So it's considered on a global scale, but from a US perspective, it is a very unique place to be preserved and considered for this recognition. And then biological diversity. So the North American coastal plain, there really isn't another site like this where we have endemics that are in place, where we have, it's a hot spot for biological diversity. There are no invasives. You know, the National Wildlife Refuge manager, Michael Lusk, who is an incredible partner to the work that we do here in the Okefenokee, you know, he really likens it to, it's like, you know, before humans walked the earth, this is what it looked like. It is a prehistoric place. It is an absolutely stunning place. And we have the wildlife is there just as you would have seen them thousands of years ago. So for those of you who haven't visited, just the aesthetic beauty of it and just the peace of being in wilderness is remarkable. But the fact that we have a place like the Okefenokee in the density of the eastern seaboard that is still so untouched is really special. And we're delighted that the Department of Interior feels that way, and that the World Heritage Convention soon is going to be recognizing that as well. In preparation for World Heritage and for recognition as a site, you know, there's a lot of activities that are happening in the local community. As I said, I work, you know, in Folkestone, in Waycross, in Homerville, in these counties around the Okefenokee. And what we've developed is an Okefenokee partnership where we've brought all the people around the swamp together, aligned in this work to expand educational infrastructure, to expand rural broadband, to tell inclusive stories of the Muskogee Creek and the first people and the nations that were here as part of the Okefenokee Swamp. Also telling the story of the first civilian conservation corps, one of the only all-Black civilian conservation corps that was housed in the Okefenokee and dug 120 miles of water trails. We're telling that story. It's being curated for the first time through the nonprofit. So we're really using this World Heritage inscription process as the anchor to telling stories, to activating infrastructure investment, to catalyzing small business starts, and to really looking at what does it mean to have a high quality of life in this rural part of Southeast Georgia. Some of the activities that are associated with World Heritage are the kind of things that we know will bring the Okefenokee Swamp to more of the world, and also allow more people to understand it, to know about it, to learn about it, and to want to visit it. So we have technical writers that have come in from all over the world. We have experts on peatlands. We have experts on swamps. We have experts on biological diversity and the wildlife, photographers, videographers, cartographers. We have an economic impact team. We are working on our public relations and our community meetings. So this is really bringing everyone together around the value of the swamp, stewarding it, keeping it intact, and keeping it healthy for future generations in a way that's meaningful for the people who live here. And then, you know, the work that I just talked about is all available on a site, okefenokeeworldheritage.org. The Okefenokee story is something that we're trying to tell broadly. We want to tell it not only regionally and across the state, but the fact that you're here hearing this story tonight is really important because, you know, we're telling people all over the country about the Okefenokee. Even though for those of us who live here, We know how special the Okefenokee is. We see out of all the visitors that come to the state of Georgia, we see 0.03% of all visitors to the entire state of Georgia, right? So we know not enough people are coming to see us. We know that there's an opportunity to tell this story and get people excited about the opportunity for the Okefenokee region and the opportunity for the Okefenokee Swamp. So I would encourage you to visit this website. Some of the activation points and some of the actions that I would hope come out of us sharing our story and our vision for the region is, get involved, volunteer. There are some funding gaps for a World Heritage site that we would welcome engagement for folks as patrons, but really just learning about it is meaningful to us. So I'm going to stop my share there and maybe answer a few questions before I hand it over to my colleague, Emily Floore.
And a minor question, very unimportant, but perhaps something that keeps people away. Those camping sites do protect you from alligators, right?
They don't. But the alligators certainly are friendly. We've never had an alligator attack in the Okefenokee Swamp. And they really do keep to themselves. But there's about 15,000 American alligators in the Okefenokee, so you're nearly guaranteed to see one when you go out for a visit.
I have a question that may be a little foreign to what we're really talking about here, but some swamps, like the Dismal Swamp, for example, were places where African American escaped slaves went and developed communities. Is there any history of that with the Okefenokee that we know of?
Yeah, so I mean, that's a great question. So there is a history of African American slaves finding respite in the swamp, and also trying to cross over from Georgia to Florida when it was Spanish held, which it was free, if they would be free at that time to cross over into Florida. So there's lots of stories of that. Kind of going back to that Civilian Conservation Corps story about Company 1433, which that story has never been it's been not archived, not curated, and not told. So a lot of the stories about escaped slaves in the Okefenokee have not been told either. So that's some of the work that we're really starting to do around the region, is ensuring that when we tell the story of the Okefenokee, is an inclusive story for the swampers, escaped slaves, indigenous people, and all the people who have called the Okefenokee home for a variety of reasons. So it's a really important piece.
What's the derivation of the name Okefenokee?
It is Muskogee Creek, and it was Okefenokee is an adaptation of Emily, maybe you can say it. I'm not sure that I can. It's Okefagwa, and it meant land of the trembling water, because of how the land succession works in the Okefenokee. Now, Okefenokee today is translated land of the trembling earth, but it's originally a Muskogee Creek word that means land of the trembling water. And when peat bubbles up from underneath the Okefenokee, it pops up, it becomes a battery. All the seeds that are in the peat come in contact with light and air, and they begin to grow. And if the battery stays floating, it will then eventually become an island and become uplands in the Okefenokee. So I think 120 miles of water trails. This is a fire-dependent ecosystem. Fire does keep the water trails open. And it's sort of a balance of fire and water throughout the Okefenokee. It's a very unique ecosystem. And so that's where it got its name. If you walk on peat, you kind of move like you're walking on a waterbed, for those who remember waterbeds, right?
I've got a question. I saw that the Everglades National Park is one of the World Heritage sites, and I haven't been to the Okefenokee, but I've seen a little bit of the Everglades. What are some of the major differences between the two?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So the Everglades is a national park, and the Okefenokee Swamp is a National Wildlife Refuge. The Everglades has been ditched, dammed, and diked
Mm.
so that it's, billions, maybe trillions of dollars that they're trying to restore the ecosystem of the Everglades, which, once you evolve it and change it in the way that man has, it makes it very difficult. This invasive species in the Everglades, it's obviously it's a different, it's in a slightly different ecosystem, but it has experienced all the negative consequences of impacts like invasive species and changing, the hydrology and the landscape around it. When you look at the Okefenokee Swamp, it really is an intact ecosystem, which, it's so important, and this is going to be a great segue to Emily Floore. It's so important that what I just shared with you, this incredible opportunity for the Okefenokee National Wildlife Refuge to remain intact and become a World Heritage Site and celebrated and visited and be a driver for a healthy rural economy. In order for that vision, that opportunity to take place, we have some things we have to be careful of today. And so I'm going to segue to Emily Floore, who is a colleague of mine here in the watershed. We work pretty collaboratively together. And Emily's going to talk to you specifically about some of the threats, some of the things that are happening in the Okefenokee that also require your attention and investment. So Emily?
Great. Thank you, Kim. And I did see someone in the chat ask that question. So everybody can see my screen, correct? Okay, great. Well, thank y'all so much for having us today. So I work very closely with Kim. So my name is Emily Floore. I'm the Executive Director and Riverkeeper for St. Mary's Riverkeeper. I'm sure many of y'all know Riverkeeper organizations and Waterkeeper Alliance and the work that we do. And we are all similar in our focus and what we do in advocacy, but we all approach it differently based on the issues within our watershed, because we're not all the same in our issues and how we go about approaching ensuring that our rivers and our waterways are protected. So we are a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and we are charged with protecting the St. Mary's River, being the voice for the river. I used to do outdoor education, so anytime I talk to kids, I'm like, we're like the Lorax, right? We speak for the river. We speak for the river, not the trees. And how we do that, how it is most effective in the watershed we serve, and the community we work with, is through our education and outreach programs, which include experiential learning opportunities, which we just started doing in 2023. We have an extensive water quality monitoring program. It's actually award-winning now. So I'll talk about that in a little bit. And of course, our advocacy effort. And we are funded by the community and donations. So we are not a state entity. Our board of trustees is not determined by who's elected in office, such as if you're from Florida, I know you know the water management districts. They are a state entity and they get state funding. We do not. So we are, St. Mary's River is 130 miles long. We do originate in the Okefenokee Swamp, just like the Swanee River does. And we flow 130 miles to the Atlantic Ocean. And I'll show you a really cool depiction of the shape of the river, because we're going to talk about Trail Ridge and how that determines the shape of the river. But we work in 2 states. So 56% of the river actually is in Georgia and 44% is in Florida, which is a blessing and a curse at times. A blessing in the sense that we get to have impact in 2 states for protecting our waterways, not just for the St. Mary's, but across both states. And it's a curse because I have to work in 2 states and have to follow 2 legislative sessions. And this year they're simultaneous. So I got to be in both places at the same time. But it really is an honor to be able to represent this river and make sure that its voice is heard in both Florida and Georgia. So in that sense, we are a part of Georgia Water Coalition, which is a group of not just water-based organizations, but any organization that has interest in preserving and protecting the waterways of Georgia. They have faith-based groups, they have scientists, they have just regular citizens. All the Riverkeepers of the state of Georgia are a part of it. And then we're also part of Waterkeepers Florida, which is a banding together of all 15 waterkeepers in the state of Florida, because Florida, unlike Georgia, is pretty much all the same, right? It's flat. So they have a lot of the same issues. Whereas Georgia, you have the mountains up in the north, and then you have the coastal area. So the issues are very different. So we banded together a few years ago to tackle some of these statewide issues, such as harmful algal blooms, which cause beach closures, which can impact ecotourism in the state of Florida. And then all waterkeepers are under the umbrella of Waterkeeper Alliance. It's like our mothership, right? So they tell us what we can do, but they give us the freedom to do it in a way that works best for our community. So our priorities as a St. Mary's Riverkeeper is water quality. We work in a very rural community. There's 2 counties in Florida. There's 2 counties in Georgia, and all the tributaries that flow into it. And 2 of the counties, one in Florida, one in Georgia, are actually the poorest counties in their states. So a lot of it's very rural. It's a lot of dirt roads. And there's a lot of septic tanks. So we have a lot of water contamination, a lot of issues with E. coli in the watershed. So we do an extensive water quality testing program. It's citizen science based. So we sample over 50 sites around the watershed, and we have about 10 groups of citizen scientists. The groups can be one person, or it can be a club that goes out and does it. So you have a group of people that go out and do it. We promote low impact development. Nassau County is one of the fastest growing counties in the state of Florida. So we review permits. We want to make sure that, if there's a development along a waterway, that, we review it and we ensure that the waterway has a voice in that protection. Right now in the city of St. Mary's in Camden County, Georgia, we're trying to get a RV park to not come in right 25 feet to the marshland. 90 RV spots potentially. It would all be on city, not septic, thankfully. But we're firing up the community to prevent this from happening. Protecting Trail Ridge from industrial threats. This is an ongoing thing. It started in the 90s with the mining industry. So it's just continuous. And we'll talk about how advocacy groups around the state are trying to protect Trail Ridge for the future. Enforcing the Clean Water Act. Really, the Clean Water Act springboarded Riverkeepers to form. It gave citizens a voice in protecting their waterways. It also provided public access to the courts. So if a group of citizens banded together and wanted to sue an industry who was actively polluting a waterway, they could do that under the Clean Water Act. Unfortunately, that's currently in question in the state of Florida through one of the House bills and Senate bills that's going through. So Florida is actually considering removing public access to the courts, which would put Florida out of compliance with the Clean Water Act. So that's one of our legislative priorities in Florida we are fighting against. And we are collaborating to promote a more resilient watershed. So the St. Mary's River originates from the Okefenokee. So this is a really nice cartoon visual of the shape of the St. Mary's River. So I call it a square root value sign. If y'all remember back in high school, or maybe you're a math nerd and you remember what that looks like. But it starts out in the southeastern corner of the Okefenokee Swamp, and I'll have a better visual of exactly roughly how big that is, which is on the west side of Trail Ridge. And Trail Ridge is 100 miles long, but only a mile wide at its widest point. So it's a ridge system. It's not a mountain. I mean, it's still Southeast Georgia, but it is a higher elevation. So on the west side of Trail Ridge, you have the Okefenokee Swamp, and that's where the St. Mary's River originates. And so water finds the fastest, easiest way to get to the lowest point. So the southeastern corner of the swamp feeds the St. Mary's. It has other major tributaries as well. It travels along the western side of Trail Ridge, and then it cuts through the only gap in that 100-mile long ridge. So you have this east to west or west to east movement of water through that ridge. And then it follows along the east side of Trail Ridge for about 30 to 40 miles. And then it turns eastward and runs out into the Atlantic Ocean for about 60 miles. So a total of 130, and it creates this really unique shape that is the border between Northeast Florida and Southeast Georgia. So these are some really beautiful images. It's been a real privilege getting to know this river and seeing it as it exits out of the swamp. We are a black water river system. And if you've never seen the black water of the St. Mary's or the Okefenokee, it's really astonishing. And what's impressive is because of the peat in the Okefenokee swamp that feeds the St. Mary's, what you will actually, if you were to do a science test on the pH of the St. Mary's River or even the Okefenokee, and pH is like, you know, the acidity or how alkaline a water body is, you can get a pH down to 3, which is the same pH as Coca-Cola. So on any water quality data impairment, it would ring a bell and be like, oh, something's happening, right? pH of 3, water bodies should not be a pH of 3. That's bad, right? You want a pH of 7. That's really where, that's that neutral number. But southeastern Georgia water bodies, pH of 3 is actually normal because what peat is it's broken down organic material and it releases something called tannins. And tannins is tannic acid. So it's the same thing in wine that makes your lips, like your cheeks kind of suck in, right? It makes it a little bit acidic. It also makes your tea turn brown after you put the tea packet in. So it's tannins in the leaves, tannins in the branches of all the trees that have fallen in and are decomposing. So that's why you have that amber color waterway. And when you look at it, it actually will reflect back out. People call it a black mirror. Because if it's calm and it's dark, you can actually, you'll see the reflection of it. It's also real cool because Trail Ridge was the original shoreline around 5,000 to 7,000 years ago. So Trail Ridge was a barrier island, just like we have Cumberland Island or Jekyll Island. So the waters were much higher, and Trail Ridge was a deposit of a whole bunch of sand and minerals. And so you get the sandy beaches along the river. And so as the sand moves to the black water, you get this beautiful amber color. And at times it actually looks like the water's on fire because of that nice red amber color. And the river starts in the Okefenokee, which is of course a National Wildlife Refuge, but it ends at Cumberland Island National Seashore, which also is a designated wilderness. So the St. Mary's River is bookended by 2 national treasures and 2 wilderness areas. And because of that, a lot of people, well, they're starting to come now, right? But you don't see a lot of development along the St. Mary's River. You go miles and miles and you won't see a person. You won't see any kind of human impact. You won't see a house, which is awesome and also terrifying. Because if you need help, it's kind of hard to get out of there. But it's quite an experience to be able to see.
And Emily, before you continue, I'm sorry to interrupt. We had a question about what is the meaning of the different colors of the waterways on the river map or on your map?
The different colors?
The blue, purple, and red colors.
Oh, so that's a map from Georgia River Network describing the paddle trails. So those are designated paddle trails through Georgia River Network, which is the paddle company for the state of Georgia. They're a nonprofit, but they are designated paddle trails. So as of right now, there's only the red section of the St. Mary's River that is designated as a paddle trail, and it's on that east side of the ridge. We're actually working with Florida, Georgia, and the National Park Service to get the entire river designated as a paddle trail. So you can go from Okie to Ocean on the St. Mary's River.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for monitoring the chat, Julie. Two sections of the St. Mary's River in Georgia are designated as recreational, which means that they have higher water quality standards than the rest of the river. We're working on getting the rest of the river to be designated as recreational. The entire state of Florida actually designates the entire St. Mary's River as recreational. So this is part of my job, is once one state has one approach and the other state has a different approach for the same water body. So what sets us apart? I mentioned our extensive water quality monitoring program. So this is what really separates us from other water keepers that you may be familiar with. So I did mention that award-winning water quality testing program. So we've been recently recognized for the team for the Horsepin Creek Improvement Project. And this was a private and public partnership between the state, between nonprofits, between local NGOs, to clean up a tributary of the St. Mary's River that was heavily contaminated by E. coli from failing septic tanks. So the county, Camden County, actually applied for a 319 grant through the Clean Water Act to get funding to remove and replace failing septic tanks. And it was about a 5-year project. They removed over 50 failing septic tanks. And our part was to monitor the water quality health. And even after replacing only a few of those septic tanks, we went from like, don't even look at the water, you'll get sick, to the green. So even just replacing a few of those failing septic tanks in a very poor community improved the quality of that tributary vastly. And so that was so successful, and we've been awarded recognition for that, along with our other team members. And we're actually now replicating it in Charlton County on Spanish Creek to do the same thing in a very poor community. We do river cleanups. If you are familiar with Riverkeepers, you know we love to do river cleanups, experiential learning. We started doing boat tours on the St. Mary's River. We do paddle trips, river enhancement projects. We have a living shoreline project that's become very successful. And of course, we have our advocacy and engagement, which I'm going to segue now to what y'all would like to know about, which is something that I can speak for since we are an advocacy group. So mining on Trail Ridge. So the images you'll see, the really bright colored one, this is called a LiDAR map. So it changes color based on the elevation. So the red is going to be higher elevation. So what you'll see is this nice little line here. This is Trail Ridge. Again, it's 100 miles long. It reaches into Florida all the way down almost into central Florida. It does have a gap right here, which is where the St. Mary's River runs through it. And so this, because of its history and that it used to be the shoreline, it's heavily deposited with very important minerals. And so that's what this mining company is after. They're looking for titanium dioxide and zirconium. And titanium dioxide is what gives the white pigment in paint. It's in your toothpaste. It's in Skittles. So if you were ever a kid and you sucked up all the color of a Skittle and it was white underneath, that's titanium dioxide. I have not let my kids eat Skittles since I know that the more you know. And so that is an aerial visual of the elevation. The cross sectional here, like a cake being cut in half, you can see that you have uplands off to the west. You have the swamp, which is in a basin. And then Trail Ridge sticks up. It's exaggerated. I mean, if you look at sea level rise or the sea level, it's about 50 feet or so above sea level, 50 to 75, depending on where you are on the ridge. And then you have this drastic drop down, which is the St. Mary's River. And yes, titanium dioxide is in sunscreen. Correct. So that just gives a really cool visual of how much higher of elevation the swamp is than the St. Mary's River. So this shows you roughly the headwaters of the St. Mary's. So 20% of the swamp feeds the St. Mary's. The rest of the 80% flows to the Swanee. But where this proposed mine site is within the headwaters range of the St. Mary's River. So this is about 8,000 acres. So the mining company does own around 8,000 acres. But the proposed mine in question is only for about 600 acres. They call it a demonstration mine because they want to demonstrate that they can do it safely and not have a negative environmental impact. They also learned in the 90s when DuPont tried to mine in this general vicinity that asking for the whole land to get permitted was a bad approach. So they're going to do this little piece. And if that's approved, it's, you know, how are they going to stop the next section from being approved? So they learned from DuPont's mistake, and now they're just trying to, you know, move north on the bridge. So the mine itself on Trail Ridge, if you think about it, so it's within the watershed, the headwaters of the watershed. So this again is a LiDAR map, so it just shows elevation. So red and the reddish orange is the highest elevation. This little pentagon, or not pentagon, anyway, I'm not a math person. This shape right here with the diagonals in it. This is the proposed mine site. And so you can see the tributaries flowing out. So this tributary is called River Styx. This is actually 80% of the swamp is fed by precipitation. The other 20% is actually by tributaries that feed into the swamp. So River Styx, appropriately named, flows into the Okefenokee Swamp. And so this is how the mine site could impact the swamp for any kind of water quality issues, surface water issues. And then to the east, you have Boone Creek, which flows off to the east side of Trail Ridge and goes to the St. Mary's. So what this really shows you is that these two tributaries, although they flow in opposite directions, flow to the St. Mary's River. So we're getting double whammied. So we're getting it from the west side as it impacts the Okefenokee Swamp, which feeds the St. Mary's River, and we're getting it to the east, which flows to a tributary to the main stem of St. Mary's River. And this is their plan. It reminds me of mowing a lawn. So they're going to do a drag line mining operation, a dry one. So they're going to excavate a pit 50 feet down. They're going to pump the water that constantly is seeping into it. And then they're going to drag line it. So this is their plan. In year one, you can see the purple color. This is the mine area that they're going to do. So it's just like mowing a lawn. They're going to go down, and then you're going to go back, and then you're going to go down, and then you're going to go back. And they're going to mine about 10 to 15 acres a month. Year two is in the green, 3 is in the purple, and then blue is in, year 4 is in blue. So this is a 4-year project. This one is. And it's about 600 acres. They are not applying for a discharge permit, meaning that they have to store all the water that they're pumping out. And so they have a series of management ponds, which are on the east side of the mining operation. So if a berm were to break, it would flow to the main stem St. Mary's, because God forbid it flows to the swamp. So they're going to they're going to hold all of this water, and they're going to evaporate it to get rid of it. So they're going to evaporate 1.44 million gallons of water a day in southeast Georgia. If you've ever been here, it's hot and it's humid. So the evaporators that they have offered up as a solution were tested in Utah, where it's dry all the time. So we don't know what's happening with their evaporators. There's suggestions that EPD, which is the Georgia Environmental Protection Division, which is in charge of approving or dismissing this permit. It's not a federal issue. It's a state issue. That they are questioning the evaporator solution. So this is taken from their mining land use plan, which was open for public comment last year. And so the ridge, they're going to be at the very top. So water underneath your feet, just like at the beach, you dig and water immediately starts filling in. The water in the ground follows roughly the contours of the land. So if the land's high, the water is also going to be high, and it all flows downhill just like you would imagine it, or just like it does on land. So you got the swamp on one side and you got the St. Mary's River on the other. The St. Mary's River is known as a gaining stream, which means the river's water source is from underground and from precipitation. However, the water levels of the river are very dependent on the water levels in the swamp. So when the swamp doesn't get a lot of water, the river is really low. And I'll show you a couple of pictures of how low it can be. And when the river levels actually drop far enough, it can actually go from a gaining river, which means the water is going into the river from the ground, to a losing stream, which means the water is actually leaving the river and going into the ground. So one of the issues we have with this is that the mining plan, they want to continuously pump out water from the excavated pit, which is 50 feet deep, to maintain an 8 foot or less of water in the pit. So that's around 1.1 million gallons of water a day. Our concern is that if you're pumping water out of a pit and not putting it back into the water budget of the system, so you're always in the negative, there's no positive, then it's going to change the direction of groundwater flow. So now you're going to get water, instead of going away from the ridge, it's going to go into filling into the pit. And now you have less water flowing to the swamp and you have less water flowing into the St. Mary's River. So what's that going to do to the water quantity of the river? And remember, we're going to get a double whammy. So if you have less water going to the swamp, you have less water feeding the St. Mary's. And if you have less water flowing east away from the ridge to the main stem, now it's going to be double as amount because you're getting less water from upriver. So what's that going to do to saltwater intrusion into the St. Mary's River? You have less water coming downstream to keep the salt water at bay. So it's pushing, all that fresh water is pushing the salt away from it. Now you're withdrawing, you're pumping the water back out. Now saltwater intrusion is going to start coming in. What's that going to do to the ecosystem? Especially when you exacerbate it by climate change. So you're going to have stronger, more frequent storms. You're going to have more frequent droughts, more dramatic droughts, and the waters are rising. So you have a lot of stuff that's working in tandem and not to the benefit of the St. Mary's River. So this is the river at low water, November 8th of last year. 5 days later, I walked across this. So that's how low it can be. That's the lowest. I mean, I was with a group of people, a bunch of Baker County people, locals. They said that they haven't seen it that low in 8 years. And then 5 days later, I actually walked across it. This is one of our kayak launch sites. And we would not have been able to launch a kayak here. On November 30th, we got a whole bunch of rain here in Georgia and Florida over Thanksgiving. And so now if you look, here's the trees. They're now right at water level. So the river is very what's called flashy. So think of like flash floods, right? You get a whole bunch of rain and it just comes washing down. So the Okefenokee got a lot of rain and it all comes down river. 5 days later, the tree roots were underwater. And then within a couple of days, it'll go right back down. So you can watch it flow all the way down. And if you watch the water level gauges, you'll see one spike up. And then a couple of days later, you'll see the next one spike up as the other one dips back down. The implication that this has for the St. Mary's River wildlife is we have Atlantic sturgeon that spawn in the St. Mary's River. This is the southernmost river on the East Coast that the sturgeon spawn. They used to also spawn in the St. John's, but they haven't caught them in over 10 years. So they don't think that they're there anymore, but you can't tell scientists to say never. So this is a sturgeon. It's about a 2-year-old sturgeon that we caught last April in our sampling efforts. And you can see the picture on the left. That's a historical picture of the sturgeon in the St. Mary's. They're as long as the truck bed, right? So sturgeon were huge. And then we overfished them for caviar, for their meat. And now they're all endangered. There are believed to be 14 St. Mary's River spawning sturgeon left. Only 14. They're different than the Satilla ones. They're different than the Savannah ones. So with water withdrawals from the mine, the concerns are that the water levels are going to drop more frequently, exposing the sandbars that people can walk across, preventing sturgeon from getting to their spawning grounds, which we don't know where they are. We also don't know when sturgeon are spawning in the river. So there's a lot of unknowns about this population. They actually thought there were no more sturgeon in the river up until 2014 when they caught the first 2-year-old. So now there's efforts that St. Mary's Riverkeeper is a part of with the feds and both states and Fish and Wildlife, the Fish and Wildlife Conservation Coalition in Florida to study the sturgeon habitat, scanning it, trying to find the limestone rocks that they need to be able to lay their eggs on. And then not just the concerns of water withdrawal for access to their spawning grounds, but also saltwater intrusion. So if the salt line moves, what is that going to do to where the juveniles hang out? And sturgeon need fresh water to spawn. If the salt keeps coming in, is that going to push them further upriver? And are they going to have more river to travel? Or are they at the uppermost section that they need to be? Some sturgeon, like in the Savannah, they travel 250 miles upriver to reach their spawning grounds. St. Mary's River is only 130. And you can't go into the swamp because the river just gets too narrow and it becomes more like a creek. So is there going to be access for them to move further upriver and then be able to get there? So that's one of the concerns we have, and one of the engagement ways that we are trying to understand the sturgeon population better. So when industry like this happens that comes in, or resiliency plans are being generated by the counties, or development is coming in, we want to make sure that these 14 spawning sturgeon habitat is protected. So some things y'all can do to get engaged is the Okefenokee Protection Act. This is House Bill 71 in the state of Georgia. They have 95 signatures from both sides of the aisle. They had a hearing last legislative session. They do not have one this scheduled yet to be heard this legislative session. There is a public reading, like a first reading, that's going to happen at the end of this month. But there is not a lot of energy to get this heard in committee. So pushing the Speaker of the House, John Burns, to make it happen, message him, pester him. I know we all love to do that. We're pretty persistent ladies. So keep pushing and pushing and pushing to try to get a hearing just to be heard. And send the same message to the Natural Resource and Environmental Committee members to let them hear House Bill 71. And what the Okefenokee Protection Act would protect Trail Ridge from future mining operations. It would not impact the one that's currently being proposed, but it would protect the rest of Trail Ridge as it is adjacent to the swamp. So it's just a small section of Trail Ridge, but it would prevent mining from happening on Trail Ridge for future mining operations. And then, of course, support your St. Mary's Riverkeeper. So we are a local, small community-based organization, and we are able to work on donations. If you're in Georgia, contact your elected officials. Tell them to support House Bill 71. If they already support it, say thank you, and try to get them to come down. Talk to your congressman, talk to your federal representatives. To try to get them to help protect the Okefenokee Swamp, and then share your love of the waterways of the St. Mary's River, and engage in the fight. So someone had mentioned about letter writing parties, so host a letter writing when public comments come available. Get together with your friends, talk about the issue, and write letters to the Georgia EPD, telling them not to permit this mining issue, and make it as technical as possible. We all love to talk about how much we love the wilderness, and we love wildlife, and we love the ecosystems, and we love our rivers, but they really want to know, what about this don't you like? What do you have questions about? They really want to get in that nitty gritty reasons to not allow it. And then get involved in the issue and help get others involved. So St. Mary's Riverkeeper, last year, we launched our Lunch and Learn webinar series. They're up on our website. We are actually about to do our 7th one. But you can watch those and get to know the St. Mary's River watershed more, get to know the issues more. We had an aquifer, a Florida aquifer expert to talk about groundwater. We had someone talking about peat, to Kim's point about carbon sequestration. And then we had a hydrologist talk about his concerns about the mining and with the Okefenokee and the impacts that could have on the St. Mary's River. But be the change. Every drop and every action makes a difference. So getting involved wherever you are with your local riverkeeper, with those of interest, with this kind of interest, your involvement's really essential into the work that we are able to do. So thank you. Visit our website, stmarysriverkeeper.org. Make a donation, support us. This is Cumberland Island. That was really fun to be able to go camp if you haven't camped there yet. Thank you so much for this opportunity. And I know I went over a little bit. I'm sorry, but does anybody have any questions?
So Emily, thank you, both you and Kim. I have a couple in the chat that I think would kind of tie a lot of this together. I want to start with Bill's because I think it ties both in. Is there, in addition to the kind of the Okefenokee Protection Act, is there still a threat of mining nearby, and will the World Heritage Site designation help to prevent kind of these outside environmental threats?
I can speak to the mining part. I'll let Kim answer the World Heritage Site part. So yes, there still is this threat. The mining company still, the Georgia Environmental Protection Division, the state environmental agency, still has not said whether or not they have accepted the mining land use plan that was open for a 60-day public comment period last year. So we're still waiting on EPD to give us an answer or to even let us know what questions they've asked the mining company to answer. So we're still waiting on all of that. It's a very lengthy process, and they had 75 to 100,000 comments come in that 60-day period last year. So they have a lot to go through.
And then I'll just respond for the World Heritage Site question. For the World Heritage Site, it's been, the Okefenokee National Wildlife Refuge has been on the list for more than 40 years. And so it's one of the first sites ever put on the tentative list on behalf of the US for the World Heritage Convention. And it's just coming off, which is pretty remarkable. So this has been, an opportunity that's been waiting decades to come to fruition. World Heritage Site does not change, that recognition does not change management or sovereignty. So the Okefenokee National Wildlife Refuge, 92% of the swamp is the refuge, will continue to be managed by the National Wildlife Refuge System with Fish and Wildlife Service. So it doesn't change management, it doesn't expand refuge boundaries. What it does do is it's catalytic to activate people's interest in the Okefenokee as a place of incredible value, an iconic American landscape. People will come visit it. It will activate the local community so that folks in the local community can say, we want to keep our swamp healthy and intact because it brings people here, that helps our economy, our quality of life improves. And these are poor rural communities in Southeast Georgia, which does not have a direct change to management or to any protections.
And we do have, thank you both. And we do have several folks joining from other states. So I would say to the question about what can we do as out-of-staters, I think part of it would be supporting the UNESCO World Heritage bid. But do you all have any other input for out-of-staters and how they can contribute to this?
Yeah, so for the mining portion of it, when public comments become available, there were, out of that 75,000 to 100,000 comments that came in, they were global comments. So they weren't just specific to Georgians. So you can learn about the issue, getting engaged, and then writing public comments. Coming down and visiting is also huge, supporting the economy of the surrounding communities, seeing the Okefenokee, seeing the St. Mary's River, and to make that connection with the comment that you can make. when public comments do become available.
Yeah, and to Emily's point, so in the comment period, there was a comment period for the Department of Interior for the Okefenokee to be considered as a World Heritage Site. They received more than 11,000 comments in support of the refuge going through this designation, this inscription process, right? So be on the lookout for that because it is a national item. It's a national issue. And then when there's a comment period that opens up for any of the threats that Emily mentioned around the region, you can send in letters, like she said, from outside of the state. To be honest, the more people who care about the Okefenokee from outside of Georgia, the safer, the more sustainable, the more preservation efforts will build around the Okefenokee because people know it's here, they care about it. So send your letters, you know, follow the Okefenokee's journey and be involved in any way that you can because we certainly need your support and we need your visitation. I have some great things for you to do in the Okefenokee, and hanging out on a camping platform is definitely one of them.
And I know Pam also asked, so HB 71 won't stop the current 600-acre mine, but would it stop the mining company from mining the rest of the property?
Yes.
Yeah.
So it would stop all future mining on Trail Ridge that is adjacent to the Okefenokee Swamp, which is the entire northern directional stretch of the St. Mary's River. So it would also protect that section of the St. Mary's River.
Am I correct in thinking that I heard that if they stop all future mining, it's going to make the company less interested in mining what is there, or is the first portion already well underway and not going to be stopped?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So the hope is that it would make it not financially viable for the company just to mine the 600, because we know that they want to mine the 8,000 that they own, and we know that they have a relationship with the landowner that's just north of them that owns 24,000 acres. So there is, you can see it, they aren't saying it, but it's very obvious their plan. And so this would prevent, it wouldn't stop the 600-acre one, but if you stop any future mining, it might not make it financially viable for that 600-acre one to occur.
And just again, to clarify, I have heard that EPD, Georgia Environmental Protection, is the permitting versus the House. How does that interact to, I mean, which one should we be going after? And
yeah, so it's in the state's hands. This is not a federal issue. The feds lost that when the Clean Water Act got rolled back. If it didn't happen in 2020, which it did, it would have just happened last year. So the wetlands in question are not federal jurisdictional wetlands anymore. So they are at the state's mercy. So the Army Corps tried to take it back last year, talking about that they didn't appropriately consult with the Muskogee Creek community. And then Twin Pines was quick to sue, and the feds raised up their hands and it went back to the state. So it is a state issue. So it would be the state that you'd want to address your comments to.
And interestingly, Ted had mentioned, I believe it was Ted, that the Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness has a mining area that's similar to this situation, which I think is, I don't know if either of you are familiar with that, but that would be cool to look into. Last but not least, I also want to respect everyone's time. So one of the questions, will the Broad send out announcements when public comment periods open? So just so you all know, from a Broad's perspective, we are interested in the Okefenokee from both a national, kind of the Colorado office, and from a grassroots level. So, and conveniently, we have Jean and Ann in Atlanta, and then as a staff member out of the Durango office, I'm in Kingsland, Georgia. So we're coming at this from a lot of angles. So yes, we will do our best to send out announcements about open comments because we are very invested in this from a national and a grassroots level. Did anyone have any last minute questions before we wrap up?
So
Are there
Julie, I
any
just want to,
mailing lists to get on so that we as individuals can keep up?
Yeah, so we have an e-newsletter we send out. So you can go on our website and sign up for our e-newsletter. We send those out during legislative session. We send them out a little bit more frequently just because there's a lot happening. We want to keep everybody up to date with. But we try to do it, once a month. But there are periods of time where there's more when there's something happening. But yes, you can sign up to get our newsletters, our e-newsletters.
and I'm going to let Emily answer that next question on the state. But first, I just want to welcome Julie to Southeast Georgia. She actually came out into the Okefenokee National Wildlife Refuge, spent a day with myself and Michael Luss, the refuge manager, exploring the Okefenokee. And we are delighted that Broads is in Georgia and in Southeast Georgia. This is phenomenal. So welcome, Julie. Really excited to get involved with you and with the organization. So really glad you're here.
Oh, thank you, Kim. And I'm so glad to meet Emily too, because she's right down the street. So we have to partner there too.
And Emily, I think they had another question for you.
Oh, what was the other question? I'm sorry.
Who at the state do we contact?
So I just dropped in the link because EPD, because of how active this issue is, it's a very hot button topic. They actually have their own page for it. So I just dropped it in the chat. So you can just Google Georgia EPD Twin Pines and it'll take you to it. You can read the mining land use plan. It's lengthy, so be happy reading. And then you can kind of see the fact sheets and everything on that page. And that's where they'll post public notifications for any comments or any additional permits that they're applying for.
Wonderful. Well, Jean, I'll let you take it away as a sum up, but thank you both from my perspective, but I'll take it on to Jean.
Well, as you mentioned in your presentations, it reminds me of a conversation I had just a couple of months ago when somebody said, oh, I was active in fighting the mines in the Okefenokee. That was back in the 1990s. You mean it wasn't finished? And time comes back, and how many more times are the people in Southeast Georgia and Georgia going to have to fight this issue? So I definitely know it's important. I feel a whole lot more informed, and I thank all of you, especially Kim and Emily, but many other people who are involved in this effort to keep the swamp intact. And you'll be hearing from us on a trip one of these days. And if you are eager to be part of the solution in an organized manner, don't hesitate to look up Great Old Broads or contact Anne or me or Julie. If you would like to have fun, be educated, be stewards and advocate, then Great Old Broads may be a good organization for you. So I thank all of you. I am sure we have a way of getting more questions answered if there are some, but Anne and I appreciate all of you attending our inaugural chapter event, our broadband event.
Thank you, Jean. Thank you, Anne. Thank you, Julie. Thank you, everyone. So nice to meet you all.
Thank you, everybody, for having us. We'll see you on the river soon.
Okay.
And the swamp.